My name is Mia Bennett. I'm 35 years old. It was Christmas Eve, and my sister had just leaned across the glazed ham and said, loud enough for the whole table to hear, 35 and still single? Wow. The holidays must feel pretty empty for you. The table laughed. My father laughed the loudest. My mother, still holding her wine glass in the air because she'd been halfway into a toast, gave me that soft, polished smile of hers and said, "Oh, she's only teasing." I set my drink down. I didn't answer her. Not yet, because what nobody at that table knew was this. I hadn't flown back to Ohio to be the family joke over Christmas dinner. I had flown home because a week earlier a file had landed on my desk, with my name at the bottom of a contract I had never seen, signed in handwriting that was not mine. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where we sit beside the quiet women who finally stop apologizing. The women who kept the peace until peace started costing them too much. Pour your coffee, settle in, leave a comment, and subscribe before we begin. You need to know who I am before I tell you what I did, because those two things don't line up with the story my family likes to tell about me. I'm an acoustician. I design rooms for sound. The way a good mug holds coffee. No spill, no slosh, no waste. I work on recording studios, lecture halls, performing spaces, even a children's hospital in Chicago, where the machines sound gentler now, because I taught the walls how to swallow the edge out of every beep. I built my practice from a borrowed measurement mic and a rented desk. And now people fly me across the country to make silence behave. My family knows that in theory. But not in any way that matters. To them, I'm still the daughter who left. The one who didn't marry on schedule. The one whose life gets turned into a little joke somewhere between the mashed potatoes and dessert. I hadn't been back to Columbus in 2 years. I wasn't planning to come this Christmas either. Then Dale called. Dale is an old technician who still works the Bennett Acoustics floor and still remembers that I'm the one who taught him to solder clean joints when he was 19 and terrified of ruining everything. He called me on a Tuesday and said, in that careful tone people use when they know they're about to hand you bad news, "Mia, they're close to selling the panel line. Big investors, big money. Your dad keeps saying all the designs are clean, all the signatures are done, everything signed over, all in the family." Then he paused and asked, "I never saw you sign anything, did you?" I hadn't. That was when I booked the flight. Not for Christmas dinner, not for family time, not for nostalgia, for one sentence in one document I needed to see with my own eyes, before anybody could tell me I was mistaken, dramatic, confused, or imagining things. A signature seems small until it's yours, and it stays yours until somebody decides your consent belongs to the family too. But all of that was still folded up inside me at the dinner table, and nobody there had any idea. Chloe was having a wonderful time. My younger sister runs marketing for the company, which mostly means she decides what version of the truth gets packaged and sent out into the world. I'm just saying, she went on, poking at her carrots. Some of us actually built something. Some of us made choices. Mia went off to what is it she does again? Makes rooms less loud. More laughter. Then my father did the thing he has always done. The thing that used to make me feel special when I was a little girl. He put his fork down, spread his hands like he was blessing all of us, and said warmly, "This family built something real. 50 years of the Bennett name on that building." He looked around the table, pleased with himself, certain of his place in the world. "And whatever any one of us does," he said, "we do it for the name. The name comes first. Always has." Everyone nodded like they were in church. My mother topped off the wine glasses and murmured, "Let's not make dinner about all that," which is what she always says whenever the truth starts trying to stand up in this family. I felt that old, familiar tug inside me, the urge to smile, laugh it off, make myself smaller so the evening could keep moving smoothly. I'd been doing that, one way or another, for 15 years. I had become the quiet room everyone could dump their noise into. I looked at my glass. Then I looked at my mother, pretty and glowing, her toast still hovering unfinished in the air, And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't shrink. I set my drink down carefully, like I was putting down something heavy I no longer planned to carry. "Don't worry about me," I said. My voice came out calm, almost gentle. "I've been married for years." The table didn't go silent. It sealed. I know silence for a living. I know the difference between a room that is empty and a room that is holding its breath. This was the second kind. My mother's glass froze halfway up. The light stayed caught on the rim. Her smile remained in place for one beat too long, like a face left behind in a photograph after the person has already stepped away. Chloe's fork tapped against her plate. "You've what, married?" I said. "6 years. My father's eyebrows rose slowly toward a hairline that had been retreating for years. 6 years, he repeated, like the number refused to make sense. "You've been married 6 years and never told your family." And there it was immediately. Not "Are you happy?" Not "Who is he?" Not "Why didn't we get to know him?" Just "How dare you keep something from us?" As if secrecy were the offense, as if privacy were the betrayal. My mother finally lowered her glass, though she still didn't drink. "Mia," she said softly, but her voice had turned thin. "Why would you hide that?" I looked around the table at the people who had made my life into a running bit for more than a decade, and thought about how impossible it is to hand joy to people who have already shown you what they do to anything tender in your hands. But I didn't say that, not then. I just said, because I wanted one thing in my life that belonged only to me. Then the questions came all on top of each other, not because they were interested, but because they were rattled. What's his name? What does he do? Why isn't he here? Is he embarrassed by us? That last one came from Chloe. She meant it to sting. Years ago, it would have. I gave them almost nothing. His name is Adrian. He's away for work. No, he isn't embarrassed. Yes, it's real. We have rings, a lease, and a life. Short answers. Not to be mean, to protect the flame. My father leaned back and studied me with a look I couldn't understand at the time, though later it would make perfect sense. "Well," he said, "you really are full of surprises." My mother reached over and touched my wrist, and for one dangerous second I nearly softened. I nearly let myself step toward that warmth. "We just want to be included in your life, sweetheart," she said, and I wanted to believe her so badly it almost hurt. But I had not flown in from Chicago, rented a car at the airport, and walked back into this house to be included in anyone's life. I had come for a document, and sitting there, with my mother's fingers on my wrist and the smoke of Chloe's laughter still in the air, I realized something cold and clean. They thought my marriage was the big surprise in the room. It wasn't. The biggest surprise was sitting in a folder in a filing cabinet, not far from where we were eating, with my forged name at the bottom. And I was the only person at that table who knew it. To explain the folder, I have to go back 11 years, because you can't understand the theft without understanding the panel. When I was 24, Bennett Acoustics was 3 months from collapsing. I had already left home at 20. I had left the noise, the smallness, the constant pressure to fold myself into whatever shape kept everybody comfortable. But back then, I still came home on weekends. I still believed families were things you could repair by giving them enough labor and tenacious. At the time, the company made standard sound panels, the gray, forgettable kind you've seen in office ceilings everywhere. Sales were dying. Nobody wanted them anymore. So I spent one winter in the back workshop designing something new, a layered chambered core that didn't just deaden sound, but shaped it. A panel that kept a room warm and full without letting it turn muddy. Something more musical, more intelligent. I built the first prototype with my own hands, and inside the wooden frame, where nobody would think to look, I wrote my initials and a line I believed in, the way a violin maker signs the hidden inside of an instrument. That panel saved the company. Orns returned. The business steadied. The Bennett name stayed on that building for another decade because a 24-year-old woman sat in a cold workshop and figured out how to give a room back its clarity. And then slowly, the story changed. The panel became the Bennett panel. Then it became Dad's great turnaround. Then it became family folklore, and I let that happen. I told myself I didn't care about credit, that I had my own life, my own clients, my own city, my own work. I told myself letting them have the story was generous. That was the lie. I had been living inside it so long it felt smooth. And now that same panel, my panel, was the centerpiece of a deal worth more money than my father had ever seen. And somewhere in a file, my name was pretending to have agreed to hand it over. The next morning, I drove out to the company and said I just wanted to see the place dressed up for Christmas. That part was partly true. Bennett Acoustics looked more polished than it ever had when I was growing up. Fresh paint, brighter floors, a glass conference room, a brass plaque near the entrance with the founding year and my father's name shining on it like a crest. There were visitors there too, men in nice coats, a woman carrying a leather portfolio, the kind of carefully neutral people who were clearly deciding whether to spend a great deal of money. My father was glowing. He was walking them past the display wall, talking in that strong, carrying voice of his. Everything you see here, we own outright, he said. Every patent, every design, fully assigned to the company, clean as a whistle, signed and settled years ago. We keep things in the family. The buyers nodded. The woman wrote something down, and I stood near a rack of holiday cards, feeling the floor tilt just slightly under me, because I knew at least one of those signatures had never been signed. If you've ever walked back into a place that used to shrink you the second you entered it, then you know the feeling I mean. A room full of confident voices speaking easily about a thing you made, while you stand off to the side like a ghost with paperwork. Stay with me. It gets quieter before it gets louder. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from, and subscribe so you don't miss the ending. I watched my father shake hands. I heard him say, "Clean again." And standing there with a snowflake melting into the sleeve of my coat, I decided I was going to read that document before I let anyone sell my name. So I asked, casually, if I could take a look at the IP paperwork. I framed it as professional curiosity. One designer admiring another company's documentation process. Chloe stepped in before I could finish the sentence. She has always had a talent for appearing at exactly the wrong moment. Why would you need to see that? She asked, smiling the brittle kind of smile that cuts on both sides. You don't work here, Mia. You haven't in years. It's really not your business. I'm just interested, I said. She tilted her head. This is so typical of you. You disappear for 15 years, show up with a secret husband, and now suddenly you want to poke around the deal that's about to change all our lives. People might start thinking you're jealous. She laughed lightly for the benefit of two employees standing close enough to hear. My mother, passing with a tray of cookies for the guests, caught the tail end of it and said without slowing down, "Oh, she's just joking. Mia, don't make a face." There it was again. That sentence, she's just joking. The sentence that makes every cut harmless and every wound your fault for noticing. I had heard it my whole life. It's a disappearing trick. It had erased my hurt for 35 years, and now they wanted it to erase something far bigger. A felony, if we're being exact. But I smiled. And I let the moment slide past, because by then I understood something important. Asking permission had been my first mistake. You do not ask the people who forged your name whether they mind if you inspect the forgery. So I stopped asking. Dale found me by the loading dock, hands buried in his coveralls, his breath white in the cold. You didn't hear it from me, he said. Then he took me to a side office where a due diligence binder had been left out for the buyers. Tabbed, photocopied, ready for review. He stood in the doorway, watching the hallway, while I flipped to the section marked Intellectual Property Assignments. And there it was. One page. A clean assignment agreement transferring all rights, title, and interest in the chambered baffle design from the inventor to Bennett Acoustics, Incorporated, dated 5 years earlier, signed on the line that read, Inventor, Mia Bennett. My whole body went still in that particular way it does when the professional part of your brain takes over because the rest of you can't afford to. I have signed my name more times than I could count. I know the movement of it the way you know the pace of your own steps. This was not my signature. It was close. Whoever did it had practiced. Whoever did it had access to real samples. But the M was too rounded. The crossing stroke in the T was wrong. And most of all, it sat too carefully on the line. My real signature has had a slight downward slope since elementary school, as though my hand has always been leaning toward escape. This one didn't. Somebody had studied me. Somebody had sat down with examples of my handwriting and rehearsed being me until the result was good enough for strangers, not good enough for me. I stood there in that borrowed office with gray winter light filtering through the blinds and felt something I had spent years refusing to feel about my family. Not grief, not even fury. Just certainty. Cold, clean certainty. Someone in my family had learned how to wear my name. So I did what I always do when the ground shifts. I gathered evidence. I good light. Front and back. Then I checked the date against my own life, because a signature does not just say who signed. It says where a person was, and sometimes location can be proved. The assignment was dated in April. That April, I had not been in Ohio. I had been in Rotterdam presenting at an international acoustics conference. My name printed in the program, my face in the event photos, my passport stamped, my hotel invoice billed to my own account. I remembered it well because it rained all week, and because I gave the best talk of my career to a room full of people who actually understood what I do. On the day that piece of paper claimed I was sitting in Columbus signing away the best thing I had ever created, I was 4,000 miles away in the rain being taken seriously. This was not clerical confusion. Nobody accidentally copies a signature onto the wrong page. Nobody accidentally forges a date. This was a choice. Someone chose to put my name where my consent should have been because asking me would have been inconvenient. Or because they already knew the answer. I closed the binder exactly the way I found it. I thanked Dale with my eyes because his job still lived in that building. Then I walked back into the lobby where my father was laughing with the buyers. I smiled at him and thought, I know now, and you have no idea that I know. I let myself keep that knowledge inside me for one day, like a coal warming a cold pocket. That evening, I helped my mother in the kitchen because I needed to know how much she understood. My mother has never been able to hold on to a thing she believes is lovely. She leaked certainty. She washed. I dried. I kept my tone easy. It's strange, I said. I don't really remember signing anything over to the company. Her hands slowed in the sink. Oh, sweetheart, she said, with that soft, soothing voice she uses when she thinks she's taking care of you. You didn't need to worry about all that. Your father handled the paperwork. You were busy with your projects. Then she smiled. He said, why bother you with forms when it was all staying in the family anyway? And just like that, without even realizing it, she confirmed everything. My father had signed my name. My mother knew in that gentle, blurred way she knows things and never names them. To her, it wasn't forgery. It was a kindness. A man sparing his our paperwork. The name comes first, she said, drying her hands, repeating him without realizing she was quoting scripture. You know how he is. I did know how he was. What I was just beginning to understand was how often I had mistaken that for how he was allowed to be. I put the last plate away and asked, as lightly as I could, whether Dad was still awake. There was no point circling it anymore. If he had done this and truly believed it was love, I needed to hear him say it directly, without buyers in the room, and without my mother translating it into softness. I found him in his study with a bourbon in one hand, and the handwritten ledger he still keeps like it's 1974. I shut the door. I didn't raise my voice. The calmest voice in a room is often the one that finally gets heard. Dad, I said, there's an assignment in the buyer's binder with my signature on it. I never signed it. You didn't, he said. Then he looked up at me. I did. No flinch, no denial, no performance of confusion, just that. And then, almost proudly, so you found it, like I had passed a test. Mia, he said, you built that panel under this roof. Using Bennett tools, in a Bennett shop. You were a Bennett. That design always belonged to the company. I just finished paperwork you were too busy to finish. I said, very quietly, forging someone's signature is a crime. He waved the bourbon like I had missed the bigger point. Family isn't a crime. You know what is? Walking away and letting the business that raised you drown. Then for 1 second, I saw the bruise underneath the man. My father did the same thing to me, he said, looking at the ledger. First panel line I ever drew, he put the company name on it and left mine off. I cried about it for a year. Then I learned. That's how a family survives. You feed the name, and the name feeds you. He looked at me like he was offering wisdom. I did you a favor. Someday you'll understand. That was the worst part. He believed it. He was not a cartoon villain. He was a man who had been robbed young and decided the robbery was tradition. Decided that what had been done to him was not damage but inheritance. I told him I wanted my name taken out of the deal. I told him the assignment was void because I had never given it. That isn't a threat, I said. That's just how the law works. And that was when the warmth left the room. My father is never colder than when you stop cooperating with the story he tells about himself. Off the deal, he said. Mia, do you understand what closes next week? Do you understand how many people are depending on that line? Dale, the whole shop floor. Your mother's retirement is tied up in this business. He stood. If you blow this up now over a signature, over your pride, that isn't me destroying this family. That's you. And everybody will know it. There it was, the oldest machinery in the house, clicking into place, responsibility. Be smaller, absorb the damage. Be the strong one. Carry the thing no one else wants to carry. I felt its pull in my chest like gravity, because that had always been my role. Not because I trust easily. I don't. I trust almost nobody. My weakness has never been gullibility. It's been this. I spent my whole life believing love meant disappearing so other people could stay comfortable. Standing in my father's study, listening to him hand me the burden of a crime he committed, I finally saw the machine clearly. It ran on me. It had always run on me. It was running on me right then, and it was counting on the fact that I would rather burn quietly than make anyone else feel hot. I didn't answer him. I walked out through the dark house, drove back to the company, and used the key Dale had given me. I told the night guard I'd forgotten a scarf. That was not why I was there. In the lobby, under a spotlight and behind glass like sacred history, hangs panel 001. The first one, the original one, the one I built by hand in that freezing workshop at 24, there is a brass card beside it now that says, the Bennett panel. The design that built our future company logo, founder's name, no mention of me. I stood there a long time. Then I took the frame down carefully. It was heavier than it looked. I turned it over. And on the back of that panel, where no buyer looks and no plaque reaches, I found what I had written 11 years earlier in the neat block letters of a young woman who still believed some part of her work would remain beyond reach. MB. And beneath it, the room where you can finally hear yourself think. I ran my thumb over the letters. Mine. They had always been mine. The front of the panel belonged to the family story. The deal, the display, the polished pitch. But the back, the hidden frame, the structure that carried everything, the part doing the actual work, was me, dull and bearing, invisible, uncredited, exactly like the daughter. I stood there alone in that dark lobby and said out loud, to no one but myself, forgiveness isn't a signature. Then I sat in my rental car in the empty lot with my phone in my hand and my husband's name glowing on the screen. And I need to be honest about what I almost did. Adrian is an investor. That's the clean word for it. He's a partner at a fund. He moves money, and he knows the people who move larger money. In the world where my father's deal was happening, Adrian was not a small name, one call. That was all it would have taken. He could have quietly asked the right question in the right ear and killed the deal before anyone even sat at the table. Or he could have stepped in, funded the company another way, and made my family grateful to me for the rest of their lives. I could have made the problem disappear. Or I could have made myself the hero. Either way, I would have walked back into that house holding the one card that would finally force them to see me. I sat there with my thumb resting over his name for a very long time. And I want you to remember that I could have done it, because what I chose instead is the point of the whole story. If you've ever had a boundary that cost you something real, then you know exactly the kind of cold I was sitting in that night, trying to decide whether winning the wrong way was still losing. Stu sword and stay with me, because this is the part I'm proud of. I did not call him to fix it. I put my phone in the cup holder. Because asking Adrian to erase the truth, whether by destroying the deal or rescuing the company, would have made me exactly like my father, another person burying truth under power, and I had not come home to become my father. I had come home to stop becoming his tradition. The next morning, before I made any final move, I called an intellectual property lawyer in Chicago I'd worked with years earlier on a licensing issue. Someone who owed me nothing. Someone who would tell me the truth. I laid it out plainly. I designed the panel. There is an assignment I never signed. My father signed my name. The company is about to sell the rights as if the title is clean. She listened, then she said, in that stripped-down way good lawyers do, Mia, if you didn't sign it, the assignment is void. Not weak. Void. A forged signature transfers nothing. Legally, you still own the design. I asked what that meant for the sale. It means they don't have clean title to the asset they're trying to sell, and when the buyer's team asks the inventor to confirm chain of title, and they will, you have two choices: ratify it, or tell the truth. If you tell the truth, they can't close on those terms. Then she paused. And the forgery itself? That's a criminal issue in Ohio. But that part isn't yours to forgive or pursue. That part simply exists. I thanked her, hung up, and sat there with that. And that was the moment everything shifted. The power in the room was never my husband's money. It was never the Bennett name. It was one signature I had not given and would not give. I didn't need to go get leverage. I already had the truth. All I had to do to bring down the whole clean as a whistle story was refuse to lie. It was the smallest action possible, and the most expensive one. My family sensed it. Families like mine always know the exact second the quiet one stops cooperating. My mother started hovering, refilling my coffee before it was empty, asking if I was sleeping, if the marriage was okay, if I was okay. Every question a small touch against a locked door. That afternoon she sat beside me on the porch, held my hand, and said exactly what my father had clearly sent her to say. Whatever is going on between you and your father, she said. Please, sweetheart, let's keep it in the family. We don't bring outsiders into our business. That's not how we do things. Keep it in the family, the grown-up version of she's just joking, same spell. Bigger consequences. Those are the words families like mine use to make sure truth never gets past the front steps. Chloe changed too. She stopped taking swipes at me. That evening she brought me tea I hadn't asked for, sat on the arm of my chair, and said, very sweetly, "You know I love you, right? No matter how this turns out." She had never once said that to me sober. That was when I knew they had all smelled danger. The whole house was rearranging itself around me, softening, managing, coaxing, trying to fold me back into my old shape before I did anything final. My mother squeezed my hand. "You've always been our strong one," she said. And sitting on that cold porch, I could feel the walls of that house leaning toward me, warm and familiar and completely committed to keeping me exactly where I had always been, inside, quiet, carrying the weight. The next morning, my father called what he referred to as a family meeting before the closing. We gathered around the same long dining table where I had been the joke a few nights earlier. Now, without anyone saying it out loud, I was sitting at the head of it. My father opened like a man chairing a board meeting, hands folded, voice measured. "We're at a crossroads as a family," he said. "There's been a paperwork issue, and we need to handle it the way Bennetts always do." Quietly, lovingly. Then he slid one piece of paper across the polished table toward me, with a pen placed neatly on top. A new assignment. Fresh date. Fresh copy. Cleaned line, a real signature this time to cover the fake one, a way to make the lie true after the fact. "All you have to do," my father said softly, "is sign what you would have signed anyway. Then this ends. No mess, no outsiders. Just family taking care of family." My mother was crying quietly. Chloe was watching me with an intensity that had nothing to do with affection. And I could feel the full weight of that house pushing on me. Sign and be the strong one. Sign and save everyone. Sign and disappear again so the room can keep functioning. I looked at the pen. I looked at the line where my name was meant to go. And I understood, finally, what the machine had been moving toward all along. It wasn't enough that they forged me once. The real goal was to make me do it to myself. To turn my own erasure into a willing act and call it love. I didn't sign. I said I needed time to think, and then I did one thing no one expected. I took the paper with me. The meeting dissolved badly after that. But that same day, something else shifted. And it came through Chloe. Because my sister, who makes a profession out of controlling stories, had done exactly what I should have expected. She had looked into Adrian. His name is unusual. His fund isn't secret if you know what databases to search. By late afternoon, Chloe knew exactly who my husband was. A partner at a fund with real influence in exactly the kind of financial world circling my father's company. She came into the guest room without knocking and sat down on the bed like she'd forgotten every joke she had ever made about me. The mockery was gone. What had replaced it was calculation. And under that, hope. "Mia," she said breathlessly. "Your husband. Adrian, do you understand who he is? I mean, obviously you do, he's your husband, but why didn't you say anything? This changes everything." And I watched, almost with fascination, as the family story about me dissolved in real time. Not the sad single daughter anymore, not the punchline, not the one who left and amounted to something conveniently dismissible. Now I was useful. Now I was access. Now I was leverage. Now, for the first time in my adult life, I was worth handling carefully, and I knew exactly what was coming next. Not remorse, not apology, not even really my signature anymore. Something bigger, messier, and wrapped in the same old ribbon labeled family. By that evening, everyone knew, and the whole house reoriented itself around that fact so quickly it would have been impressive if it weren't so sickening. My father poured me the expensive bourbon he had never once offered me before. My mother kept touching my shoulder, my hair, my sleeve. Then came the ask, not all at once. In relay, so no one person had to own the full ugliness of it. Couldn't I just talk to Adrian? Couldn't he introduce the buyers to the right people? Couldn't he smooth over the diligence issue? Maybe bridge the financing? Maybe make the whole title problem irrelevant? Chloe put it most clearly, with a bright smile. Can't Adrian just make this go away? Men like him do that all the time. My father spread his hands again, like he was offering prayer instead of exploitation. You have this extraordinary resource, Mia, and you'd let the family sink instead of making one phone call? Then, wounded and noble. The name comes first. It always has. And right now, the name needs you. That was the third time I had heard that line that week, and it was the first time I understood it fully. The name comes first had never meant the family protects its own. It meant the family uses whoever is available. For years, the name had used me by making me small enough to laugh at. Now it wanted to use me by making me a savior, same machine, same fuel. Only the market value had changed. I looked at the people I loved and could not trust. All of them reaching toward me for rescue built on top of a lie. And I saw the tradition clearly enough to break it. I did call Adrian that night, but not to ask him to save and seem. I went out into the backyard where my father's Christmas lights blinked red and green over the snow and told my husband everything. The panel, the forged signature, Rotterdam, the family meeting, the pressure, the ask. He listened the way he always does, quietly, completely, without grabbing the story away from me and turning himself into the center of it. One of the 1,000 reasons I married him. When I finished, he didn't say, "I'll handle it." He said, "What do you want to do?" Not "what should we do?" "What do you want?" I said I wanted the truth on the record and whatever followed to follow. He was quiet for a beat. Then he said carefully, "There may be a conflict issue here. If our fund has any relationship to the buyer, and it's possible, then the second your name is attached to this formally, I would have to recuse myself. I'd touch it, and I wouldn't want to." "Good," I said, and I meant it. Because there in the cold between two homes I had lived in, the difference between my family and my marriage became perfectly clear. My family's instinct was to use every relationship as leverage. My husband's instinct was to step back the moment his presence could contaminate the truth. One side believed power meant making a problem disappear. The other believed integrity meant refusing to be the reason it stayed hidden. I stood out there, after we hung up, watching my breath and the blinking lights on my father's neat, cheerful lie of a house, and I knew what I would do at the closing. I just had to survive the night first. I stayed up late at the little desk in the guest room and did the least dramatic, most important thing I have ever done. I wrote a letter, not to my family, to the buyer's counsel and the diligence team. Short, factual, no emotion in it. I am the inventor of the chambered baffle design. I did not sign the assignment dated April 5 years ago. On that date, I was in Rotterdam and can document that fact. I do not ratify that assignment. I retain ownership of the design, then I printed it, and I signed it with my real signature, the one with the slight downhill pull, the one that belongs to my actual hand. I sealed it in an envelope and set it beside my keys, and then I sat there with the full cost of it. Because I owed myself honesty, delivering that letter would not simply embarrass my father. It would stop the deal. No clean closing. No large investor money. Possibly no company in its current form. Dale might lose work. My mother's retirement might shrink. The Bennett name might come off that building after half a century. And if everyone wanted to trace all of that back to one woman refusing to lie, they could. I did not pretend otherwise. I did not comfort myself with the fantasy that everything would be fine. It would not be fine. This was the line, and once I crossed it, there was no path back to being the good daughter. I put my hand over the envelope in the dark, and I left it there. My mother came to see me before dawn. Maybe she heard me awake. Maybe she simply knows when the emotional weather changes in a house. She came in wearing her robe, looking smaller in the gray morning light than I had ever seen her. She sat on the edge of the bed and took my hand. Then she aimed straight at the deepest wound in me without knowing she was doing it. "You've always been our strong one," she said. "Since you were little. The one who could handle things. The one who never needed as much. Chloe falls apart. Your father is all pride. But you've always been the one who could hold everything together." Her eyes filled. "Please don't be the one who breaks it. Sign the paper, make the call. Be who you've always been for us. Just this once more." And I understood that she was not trying to be cruel. She was telling me the most honest thing she knew. My value in that house had always lived in how much of myself I was willing to give up. They loved me, in their way, for my usefulness as a container, for how much weight I would quietly carry without asking anyone else to touch it. It was the truest thing anyone had said to me all week. And it broke my heart. I held her hand and answered gently, because I wanted her to feel the difference between a refusal and a punishment. "Mom," I said, "I forgive him. I forgive all of you. But forgiveness isn't a signature." She didn't understand. I watched her not understand and realized, maybe for the first time, that the language I had finally learned to speak was one my mother had spent her entire life making sure nobody in this family could hear. After she left, I sat in the thin blue dawn and finally faced the truth I had avoided for years. I had told myself my silence was generosity, that letting them keep the panel, the credit, the story was a gift I gave from strength, that staying quiet protected everybody. But with that envelope by my keys, I saw the truth. My silence had never protected anyone, it had funded them. Every year, I let Chloe mock me without consequence. I taught her I was cheap to spend. Every time I let my father tell buyers the panel was his. I taught him that taking from me came free. Every time my mother said she's just joking and I smiled. I helped cement the lie in place. I had not been holding up a family. I had been supporting a fiction. And the strong one? The one who never needed much? The one who could carry anything? That was not praise. That was a job description for the person trained to absorb whatever nobody else wanted to feel. The cruelest theft wasn't the forged signature. It was teaching me that erasing myself was virtue. I watched the sky shift from gray to pale gold over the neighboring roofs and felt something unclench that had been tight since childhood. I didn't want revenge. That matters. I didn't want to burn them to the ground. I just wanted to stop being the fuel, and there is only one way to stop being fuel. You refuse. Out loud. Quickly, the closing was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the glass conference room at the company. I walked in wearing my own coat, carrying my own envelope, and sat down at the table without waiting to be invited. The buyer's team was there. The woman with the leather portfolio. 2 lawyers, an accountant with a laptop. My father sat at the head of the table in his best suit, gracious and expansive, the founder preparing to collect his reward. My mother sat against the wall, hands folded so tightly in her lap they looked fragile. Chloe stood near the door with her phone ready, prepared to whatever happened into whatever version of reality the family would need next. The paperwork was laid out beautifully. Tabs. Folders. Signature flags. My father was in the middle of one of his origin stories. The early years, the struggle, the vision, the family grit. The buyers were smiling politely. It was all going so smoothly, so neatly, that for a second, I could see exactly how the morning would have unfolded if I had never come home. Then the accountant looked up from his screen and said the words I had been waiting a week to hear. Before we finalize the IP transfer, we just need the inventor of the core design to confirm the assignment on the record. Standard chain of title confirmation. He glanced around the room. Is the inventor available? Every face turned toward me. My father's smile stayed in place, but his eyes found mine. There was warning there, pleading. And beneath both, the deep certainty that I would do what I had always done. The room went still enough that I could hear the HVAC humming. I set my envelope on the glass, and I knew, with complete clarity, that the next sentence out of my mouth would decide who I actually was. My father moved first. Smooth. Warm. Effortless. That's my daughter, Mia. The inventor, of course. He slid the fresh assignment toward me. The new one, the clean one, the one that would erase the old lie by making me consent to it. The pen was already resting on top. She's just confirming what was signed years ago. Go ahead, sweetheart. His voice filled the room. Everyone waited. My mother's hands tightened. Chloe stopped breathing near the door. All I had to do was pick up the pen. One signature, and the family would be saved. The deal would close. And I would walk out of that room, the woman who rescued everybody at last. Finally useful enough to be permanently loved. I looked at the pen. I looked at my father. Then I placed the pen back on the glass and pushed it, gently, an inch toward him. I'm not confirming it, I said, because I never signed it. The words hit the room like a dropped tray. One of the lawyers sat forward. The accountant's hands froze over the keyboard. I kept my voice level, professional, almost clinical, the way I would explain a flaw in a room's acoustics. The assignment in your binder is dated in April 5 years ago. On that date, I was in Rotterdam presenting at a conference. I have the conference program, photographs, passport stamps, and hotel records. I did not sign that document. Someone signed it for me. I opened my envelope and laid the letter on the table within reach of buyer's counsel. I am the inventor of that design. I never assigned it. And I do not ratify the assignment now. My father's face was doing something I had never seen in all my 35 years. And into that sealed, stunned silence, I said the sentence I had been walking toward for most of my life. I forgive you, Dad. I'm still not signing. My family recovered faster than the lawyers did, because my family had a backup plan and the lawyers didn't. Chloe crossed the room in 3 steps and hissed at me, "Call Adrian. Right now. Fix this, he can make this disappear." One call. My mother was standing by then, pale, saying my name like it was a prayer and a warning at the same time. My father found his footing and turned to the buyers with a charming, embarrassed laugh. "This is just a family misunderstanding. My daughter is very well connected. Her husband's fund, there may be ways to restructure, maybe bring in the right partners." And just like that I saw it again, plain as daylight. Even now, even here, even with the truth sitting on the table, they were all still reaching for the same tool. Use the connection, use the husband, use power, use whatever is nearest to bend reality back into place. And yes, it would have been easy. I could have taken out my phone. I could have let Adrian's name enter that room like a new kind of gravity and watched everybody rearrange themselves around it. The deal might have survived. My family might have worshipped me for it. The crime might have dissolved into money. That was the offer. That had always been the offer. And I refused it. "I'm not asking my husband to fix this," I said, to all of them now. "He's already recusing himself if there's any possible conflict. He won't touch this, and neither will I use him to bury it. If you want the design, you can license it from me honestly, in writing, on the record. And the company can answer for how my name ended up on a document I never signed." The win and the loss arrived in the same breath. I had my name back. I had my voice back. I had the truth in the open, and a marriage I no longer had to hide like contraband. And across that glass table, I watched my mother choose the name over her daughter without saying a word. I knew she would. I had known it all night. It still hurt clean through. My father lost the last thing he'd been clinging to. Composure. He shot to his feet, face red, voice breaking open in front of the buyers, in front of everyone. "After everything this family gave you," he shouted, the founder's polish stripped right off him, "you'd destroy it over a piece of paper? Over your pride? You always thought you were better than us. Better than the name." His hand slammed the glass. Even the buyers flinched. The name comes first. And this time I let him say it, let it hang there in the wrecked air between us. Then I answered him quietly, the way you end a harsh sound in a room. Not by fighting it, but by absorbing it until it dies. "No, Dad, the truth comes first. The name is just what you called it when you wanted us quiet." He had nothing to say to that. There was nothing to say. Chloe stood still, her phone dark in her hand, looking at me like she had never seen me clearly before. And my mother, who had spent a lifetime saying she's just joking, who had asked me one more time to disappear for the good of the family, covered her mouth and turned away from me toward my father. She chose him. She chose the name. She chose the known lie over the daughter telling the truth. I had expected it. I had prepared for it. It broke my heart anyway. That clean, terrible kind of break that comes not from surprise, but from certainty finally proving itself. The buyers began collecting their papers. The deal was dead, and I stood there in the wreckage of my family's favorite story, feeling two things at once. Lighter than I had been in 15 years, and lonelier. Both were true. Here's the part I want you to notice, because it matters most. No one got crushed by hidden power. No fund swept in and punished my family. No rich husband made a call. What happened next was much simpler than that. The truth, once it was on the record, did what truth does. The buyer's lawyers could not close on intellectual property with a broken chain of title. So they stopped the deal for review. The accountant flagged the assignment. Buyer's counsel advised exactly what they had to advise. The company would need to correct the file, which meant admitting in writing that a signature had been forged, and by whom. My statement remained in the record. Plain, factual, impossible to spin. And the law took it from there, slowly, without drama, without caring in the slightest about the Bennett name. There was likely going to be a civil reckoning, maybe more. As the lawyer told me, that part wasn't mine to prosecute or forgive. It simply existed. The design reverted to its rightful owner, which was me. The same way it had always belonged to me whether anyone acknowledged it or not. And the machine my father had built, the one that ran on my silence, stalled the instant I stopped feeding it, because it turned out my silence had always been the fuel. I did not win with money. I did not win with leverage. I did not win with marriage, or status, or revenge. I won by refusing to sign my name to a lie, one calm refusal in a quiet room. That was it. And it was enough to bring the whole thing down, not because I was powerful, but because the structure had always been standing on the one word I finally would not say. I wish I could tell you the family shattered, and everyone learned their lesson. That's the internet version. It isn't the true one. Bennett Acoustics didn't disappear, it shrank. The big deal died. Months later, a smaller, honest one came along after the records were corrected, and the title was clean. The company survived, just at a size that matched what it had actually earned rather than what it had pretended to own. Dale kept his job. My father never admitted he was wrong. To this day, he tells people I betrayed the family over pride. In his own mind, he is still the wounded founder, undone by an ungrateful daughter. A man who was robbed young and decided robbery was a legitimate family tradition, cannot afford to see the truth another way. My mother and I speak occasionally. Carefully, at a distance that no longer pretends to be closeness. She has never apologized. I no longer wait for one. Chloe surprised me. She hasn't apologized either. Not really. But something in her changed. She went quiet in a way that isn't natural for her. And a few months later, she called just to ask how design licensing actually works. And for the first time in our lives, she listened to my whole answer without interrupting, mocking, or turning it into a joke. I don't know what that means yet. Maybe nothing. Maybe the beginning of something. But for the first time in 35 years, my sister asked me a real question about my work and waited for the real answer. The first thing I did when I got home to Chicago was stop hiding Adrian. Not with a dramatic reveal. Not with a social announcement. I just stopped treating my own marriage like contraband, because the reason I had hidden him was finally gone. I had hidden my marriage from my family for the same reason I had hidden behind the back of that panel. Because I learned early that anything I loved, once visible to them, could become either a joke or a resource. But I don't live in that house anymore. I don't need to make my happiness invisible to keep it safe. The second thing I did took longer. Chloe has a daughter. My niece. 8 years old, sharp as flint, already being described as dramatic, difficult, too much. The last time I saw her, she asked me what I do. And instead of shrinking my work into something easier to digest, I told her the truth. I make rooms where people can hear themselves think. Then I showed her how a panel works, how silence can be shaped, how a room can be made kinder. And I watched her tuck that knowledge somewhere permanent. The idea that a woman can build something, put her own name on it, and not apologize for taking up space. That is how these things break. Not always in one grand confrontation. Sometimes by making sure the next quiet girl learns sooner than you did. That love is not supposed to cost her disappearance. Pantel 001 hangs in my Chicago studio now. After the sale collapsed and the assets got sorted, I bought the original back for almost nothing. Nobody else cared about one old panel. My father couldn't stand to look at it. It hangs on my wall turned backward. The polished front faces the wall, the back faces the room. So when people walk in, the first thing they see is the pale inner wood, the block letters of a 24-year-old woman signing the only part of her work she believed no one would ever take. MB, and beneath it, The room where you can finally hear yourself think. Clients ask me about it sometimes. Some days I tell the short version. Some days I tell the whole story. And after all of it, the only wisdom I really have is this. Forgiveness does not require you to sign your name to the thing that erased you. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for a family is refuse to vanish inside it. That's my story. A forged name, a Christmas dinner, a signature I never gave and refused to give again. If you have ever been the strong one, the quiet one, the one who kept the peace until the peace started costing you your own name, then ask yourself tonight whether you are really keeping peace or funding a lie. Then do the brave, quiet thing. Thank you for being here. Leave a comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.